Thank you for braving a 10:30 a.m. panel. My name is Paul Brooks. I am the CEO of Take Aim Media, a publicity and media relations company based in Calgary now. Welcome to our panel discussion on building a marketing plan. Today we are privileged to have two esteemed experts in the music industry joining us. We have Nicole Swanson, representing Cadence Music Group, an innovative independent music company, and Sean Petch, the driving force behind Trickle Down Music, a valuable resource empowering independent musicians worldwide. As we delve into the intricacies of crafting impactful marketing strategies for album releases and EPs, as well as promoting concerts, let's gain insights from these industry visionaries. Without further ado, let's begin our exploration of the art and science of music marketing. So how many independent artists are in the room today? Lots of independent artists. How about agents and/or artist managers? Okay. Anybody running a record label in the room? Okay, good. A good spread. Lots of independent artists. So I think a good place to start when you want to market something is trying to figure out who you're going to market it to. So, Nicole, let's talk about understanding your audience. How do you identify and define the target audience for something like an album release, considering the incredibly diverse landscape of music consumers today?
So I don't want to start on the dry side, but data is always a good place to start, and it's always kind of our first reference point, whether it be on your socials or your distributor or your DSP artist accounts. Again, great place to start. I wouldn't solely look at that. I also think a good place, I'm mostly on the DSP side for marketing. So we pitch our music to Spotify, Apple, so that's kind of the lens I see things through. So I always like to look at playlists of contemporaries. I think for artists, looking at your contemporaries and also aspirational artists. There's so many fun spaces, especially on Spotify now. Not necessarily like genre siloed, but genre crossover. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start and kind of see where they're active. But yeah, basically it comes down to your engaged audience, so on socials as well.
What if I'm starting from completely scratch? I have nothing. I'm just starting my DSP profiles and my social media accounts for a brand spanking new project. What would your first order of business be or recommendation be?
Yeah, I think for DSP profiles, I know everyone probably knows the Spotify for Artists, Amazon for Artists. I'm just getting familiar with, there's so many platforms, so kind of start with the big ones, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. They're all offering very different creative avenues. So Spotify, we're kind of like learning this weekly, which is, ongoing, but Spotify has a lot of visual opportunities, Canvas, they now have Marquee. Apple Music, you can do motion art. Amazon, you can do audio. So I think just kind of really digging deep into those. Obviously the partners like to see it, but it's more of like a fan experience. And if you're really kind of, making your profile more than just like, here's my music, no photo, no bio, like not communicating your story, like that's kind of your platform and your avenue to find new audience. So I would start there. And again, looking at kind of like the spaces where you see yourself, creating your own playlists of contemporaries. Spotify has a great option for that. Yeah, and I guess social, same thing, like just making sure everything's up to date, looking kind of professional, but speaks to you as well.
Sean, in case you're just joining us, we are talking about building a marketing plan, and the first thing we're talking about is understanding your audience. So Sean, you have a lot of great resources up on your Trickle Down Music website. Where do you point people first if they want to figure out who their audience is?
Well, I personally think the best starting point is ideally, theoretically everyone here is going to play live shows. There are recording only projects, but if you're playing live shows, your audience for your first show is your friends and your family and people in bands that and you invite them. And ideally it's a great show and they'll come back. You get those, you follow those people on Instagram, you follow those people on Twitter, on whatever. And over time, you know, you play shows with other bands, you make those kind of connections. So I think that that's like for people who are really starting out and don't have these platforms, like you have a circle of people who want to support you. Start with that, and then you can kind of move to the next stage of who are the similar people, one step removed, two steps removed, similar people in Edmonton, similar people in Lethbridge, Vancouver, then you start thinking Canada, etc. For me, for the website that I run, trickledownmusic.ca, it's just basically a resource. It's everything I've ever learned about releasing music as an independent artist. So it kind of just goes step by step. If you're completely new to making an album and releasing it, like these are the steps you need to do more or less in order. So I would just say go to that website if you're completely new to it. A lot of people in here, like I recognize a lot of faces, great musicians. Some of this stuff will be very obvious and you can skip it, but yeah, I don't know. I still am a believer that like you start by cultivating an audience by playing shows, making good music, and doing it often, and you know, trying to get out there.
So it's an incremental process.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't. But for me, at least, it has been very slow and incremental. Haven't gone viral yet.
When I'm talking to folks about publicity and media relations, I'm finding a lot of tension between people wanting to release music for DSPs and people wanting publicity. I don't think that releasing one single every couple of months is really effective when you're trying to build a media and publicity profile, but it might, you know, really juice your numbers in the DSP. So in your experience, how crucial is storytelling in shaping an artist's brand identity, and how can independent musicians effectively incorporate this into their marketing plans? Sean, do you want to start with this one?
Sure, yeah. I wish it wasn't as important as it is. Like, I wish that people, like, I know people in this room that make great music, and I wish that was enough. Like, you could just send your music and people would bother clicking it, listen, say this is great, I'm gonna play it. They deserve success. My experience, especially on the like publicity side, if you're trying to get radio to talk about you, if you're trying to get, you know, CBC articles, even your local, like here are the Calgary Heralds, the equivalent in your towns, like generally they don't have music journalists working for them anymore that would be interested in, you know, you're taking 70s post-punk and mixing it with, you know, 90s grunge or something. What they're interested in is like, what story can they tell to fill half a page? Mm-hmm. And so the newest band that I formed, for example, like I was really proud of our record. We did it during the pandemic at home. I knew no one would honestly give a shit when we were putting out music, other than the story that like we were a couple at home that like made a song each Saturday. We put that out, and like that's a story for CBC. Mm. If we just sent our music to CBC, we're a little too loud for them. Like they would never play it otherwise, but that narrative was kind of a way in. And I think that's true for a lot of people. Less so for things like campus radio that are actively looking for new music and genres, but you know, for kind of that like next step up, they need a story. And you know, most musicians have a good one, to be honest.
Yeah. Nicole, what do you think?
Yeah, it's very important on our end. I also think everything's very intertwined. So on our pitching side, we take into account our marketing, but also publicity, radio, tour, everything helps build the story. But for every release, every track on a release, we always ask for a quote, project overview, kind of like what your vision is. It doesn't have to be this sort of like wild, outstanding story. It's just, you know, the more that you can kind of convey your message to us, it helps us with our partners. You know, they always like to know if you're moving sonically in different directions. You know, we've had artists move from R&B to pop or dance to pop, and like, you know, kind of where is this going? What are the big moments? So the best, you know, is coming from you, and the best that you can convey that to us, then, you know, we can kind of pass that along.
We'll save some time at the end of the chat for questions, but definitely be thinking if you want to ask our panelists or myself any questions related to building a marketing plan. All right, let's talk about utilizing social media platforms. So the rules on social media change every 5 days, it seems. With the ever-changing social media landscape, what are the most impactful strategies for leveraging platforms like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube to engage and promote music effectively? And we'll put a timestamp on it. In November 2023, what's effective?
I would say because of all the platforms out there, like, don't stress about being super active on everything. Like, I think just know where your audience is, and if someone's like, throw 30 TikToks out a week and that doesn't feel organic and authentic, then don't do it, because, it's not going to reach your audience on the same level. Sort of like tips that I've learned, and again, probably always changing, for TikTok, a lot of lifestyle content always works. We work with an artist who is a cosplay artist, and kind of converting her audience there over the music. We had an artist that was really into cooking and kind of like using her music and with that. So I think that's probably the biggest one, where like, if you have a fun idea, a series, whatever, like throw as many as you want out there and see what sticks. Like, you don't have to, but the sort of frequency is kind of unlimited. Obviously Instagram could be way more curated. That's where you can kind of put out your teasers, you're out now, you're very sort of like visually appealing graphics. And then YouTube, like anything else, is going short form too, so any YouTube shorts. I know TikTok, I think their algorithm doesn't like, videos shot outside of the platform, but I think you can use posts from there to YouTube shorts and vice versa across Instagram. I don't think there's any issue with that. I also went to a Snapchat summit the other day, and Snapchat is something that's so beyond me, so that's coming back. So keep an eye out for that.
It never left.
It never left, yeah. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just where your audience is and where they're really engaged. Like, put most of your focus on that, because that's going to be the most effective.
So I'm hearing authenticity, do something that feels good to you, and also don't say you're going to do all the platforms. Maybe pick one or two and really figure them out before adding more onto your plate.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's enough, I think, being an artist in general. So having that kind of extra stress, I think focus in where it feels right.
Sean, what are your thoughts? What do you like social media? Do you hate having to populate it? What's your feeling?
I have fun on some of them. My number one piece of advice would be go to the TikTok panel that's happening here, because I have nothing smarter to say than someone who works at TikTok. So go to that. And then my other thing to say, I think the authenticity thing is like bang on. You have, like, people know when you're, I don't know, you can just feel if someone's being fake or they're trying to sell you something. And the only asterisk I would put to that is, if I'm being authentic, I'm embarrassed to promote myself. And I would just say, like, someone once said this to me, the only thing more embarrassing than promoting your own band is not promoting your own band. Like, if you're not excited about the show you're playing and you're not excited about your new album, how do you expect, like, let alone a close friend, but like someone who kind of knows you? So that would be my only, like, additional thing, would be like, maybe just push yourself a little bit and say, like, I am excited to be playing this show, and I should, post about it on Instagram or Twitter or wherever you are, TikTok.
One of the pieces of advice I give people is, it's like, the Marshall McLuhan saying, the medium is the message. Social media is for entertainment and information. It's not primarily for marketing. That's what I recommend to people. The marketing happens is a byproduct of you entertaining and informing people. So instead of coming out there with hard marketing messages, show yourself cooking, and maybe you have your track on in the background. Does that resonate with you?
Totally. Yeah, I think making anything more personal, like, I always kind of like seeing an artist, like, even if you're just like, hey, my track's out, but like they're in the video, like, it makes it more personal than just like, obviously, like, sort of the motion graphics and stuff, like, they're nice too, but it's kind of the easiest way that you can send your message and make it more personal.
And the thing I'd add too is, I think a lot of, like, I did a marketing degree, and the best thing I got out of it was being taught that you can just look at marketing like it's problem solving. Like a lot of people think marketing, they think advertising, or they think like building your brand in really kind of nebulous, sometimes icky ways to artists. But if you think of marketing as just problem solving, like your problem is I have music and I want people to hear it, or I have music and I want to make a bit of money on it. I have music, I need to get it to people in Edmonton. Suddenly it all feels a little more doable, and what you do on those platforms can make a lot more sense. Like, it makes sense that you would want to promote your shows. It makes sense that you would want to reach out to promoters and other, playing shows is marketing. Releasing music is marketing.
Nicole, you also talked about experimentation. Another thing I tell artists is like, dare to suck on this platform, dare to like try something new and have it be lame and not work. You'll learn a whole lot about what works and doesn't work if you just try. And with the way that your followers are being throttled anyways, only a segment of your followers are going to see that piece of content anyways. And so, yeah, experimentation, trying stuff out, being really curious always seems to be in style, I think. Okay, so let's talk about maintaining an emotional connection. In the last few weeks, I've been chatting with artists and music companies, trying to figure out, how we're going to approach marketing music. And some artists are not feeling like making music or art. Some are feeling like, what's the point of marketing this when there are really heavy things going on? So in times of crisis, such as wars and natural disasters or the current climate crisis, how can artists ensure that their marketing efforts for creative projects like albums and EPs maintain a genuine emotional connection with the audience, offering solace and inspiration while also being sensitive to the prevailing circumstances? This is a big question and one that's really on my mind right now. Sean, what do you think?
The grim answer would be, it's not going to get any better. Like, there's always wars, there's always natural disasters. We put out a record during the lockdown period of the pandemic. There were artists really struggling to release music during, when the Black Lives Matter protests were at their peak. Natural disasters, like fires, war, the reality is in my lifetime, I don't think there's probably been a day that's gone by that something terrible hasn't been happening. So I would just say it comes back to that authenticity piece to me, because you have to be authentic with yourself. Do you actually not want to put out music right now? And if the answer is no, you don't, you shouldn't. If that music got you through those tough times, or if you feel it could get other people through tough times, or it's the thing that makes life worth living, you're really proud of this project, a musician in Calgary has no control over what a president decides to do. And as long as you're being authentic, I think people can read that. And I think that authenticity piece is really important too, because I think there's a lot of artists that feel well, if I'm putting out music, I gotta make my statement really matters on everything, and they feel they have to comment on everything. And you see some really dumb comments about what's going on in the world that actively, hurt that band's release. There was a political band just recently that made some very beige comments about a war, and they kind of made their brand on being a political, opinionated band. And it was just kind of they've gone from kind of darlings that couldn't go to do wrong to just on the trash pile. So I think that authenticity thing really matters. You have to be authentic to release music, but you also have to be authentic to do I have anything to even say about this?
Well, I think, activism, very little activism happens online, and a lot of really important activism happens in person, and somebody might not be the most confident with using the medium of social media for their activism. So they might feel shame or fragile over that. But I think, what you're talking about, authenticity, if you are a confident person with your activism and you feel like you want to use your profile for that, that is your choice. And it comes back to that authenticity piece of like, if that really is important to your beliefs and values and the way you want to develop your audience, then that is your choice to do. Nicole, what are you telling artists and clients right now that you're working with who are maybe trying to figure out, is this even the time for me to do this?
Yeah, I 100% agree with like everything you said. Authenticity, just trust your gut. It's the one thing that you have, you know, if it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. I think your social media platform is your space to talk about what you want to, project yourself how you'd like. And I don't think if you don't post something, it doesn't mean you don't have an opinion, you don't feel a certain way. Yeah, so I think people need connection more than ever. If you can put some bright spots out there, really sort of engage with people, have those conversations if it feels right. But yeah, trust your gut.
Let's talk about partnerships and collaborations. So Nicole, could you share some examples of successful collaborations between musicians and brands or influencers or maybe other artists, and how these partnerships contributed to the artist's visibility or sales streams?
Yeah, totally. So for any of our brand partnerships, I can't think of a specific example, but we do work with an agency where we work with artists on what their interests are, what brands they like, hobbies. So we're kind of starting from that way that we can make a connection if something comes up. But one campaign that was really cool, it's just kind of wrapping up, but we work with an artist, Jaylee Wolf, and she was the Equal Ambassador for Spotify for the month of October. So it included a billboard in Toronto and New York, flagship placement on the Canada playlist, and also the global campaign. And then also her sort of like how she sees her music fitting in that space. And it works so well because her music is very empowering for women. It has a strong message on its own. So it was just a really cool, like, both on our end and with Spotify, how that kind of came to be. I think with like collaborations with artists, always my favorite to see is like cross genre and cross market. We were working with Snotty Nose Res Kids on their Life After album. And when they did collab with OBGMs, like the track Sink or Swim with Just John, it was kind of like very like a little bit rock leaning to start. And then with OBGMs, it just had this really cool like space crossover on DSPs, you know, kind of the reaching new audience. So yeah, I always like to see that. And especially on like our dance label, artists working with, you know, artists in Europe and kind of crossing over markets there. There's so many opportunities, and with everything so digital and global, like there's just a lot more out there, I guess.
What about you, Sean? Do you have any, I mean, the scale of some of these collaborations is larger. What about on a more grassroots, like local level? What are some folks or like some maybe some like low-hanging fruit for
I mean,
artists?
I think like a partnership that always, again, it's like one of those things that like people probably don't think of this as partnerships, but you know, partnering with other bands in your town. So like I think there's been some shows at the Palomino recently where the kind of theme of the night would be take an old school Calgary kind of like iconic band that people have sort of forgotten about. You get them in the room and you populate the bill with the younger bands that either were directly influenced by them or don't know that that band existed. You know, maybe like a garagey punk band that was really well renowned in the 90s. And then you get that audience crossover, right? The older folks that are going out to their one show a year all of a sudden realize, hey, there's 8 other bands that I like that play this kind of music still. And for the young bands, you're maybe attracting that audience that actually has the money to buy a record, which would be great. Yeah, I don't know. There's like businesses, like there's a lot of bands that have brewed beers with local breweries, and then you know you get the promotion from the brewery. The brewery sells a bunch of beer at the show. Maybe the budget for the show is a little higher because of that promotion, so the band gets paid a bit more. There's kind of that kind of thing, and then you know you can kind of work your way up, and somewhere up here is Margaritaville and Jimmy Buffett, which is also aspirational, I think.
Amazing. Okay, I have maybe one more question that I'm going to ask, and then we could open it up to the floor for some questions. I'm curious how you each approach project management itself. We've been talking about kind of like the bucket of building a marketing plan and all the components that go into it, but how the hell do you keep track of it and keep it on rails so that it moves through and achieves the goals that you set out at the beginning of your campaign? I personally use Google for everything. Everything is in Google Workspace for me, and that is how I project manage and look out for maybe 40 projects at a time, and I'm able to set it up, and that works quite well. And I'm extremely anal with my organization. So that's me. What about you?
Yeah, I think so. Our label is a larger label. I guess basically it's Cadence is the umbrella company, but we have 4 domestic imprints and then also Fontana North. So we do distribution for other labels and artists. Previously, I was doing solely distribution, and now I'm kind of between our marketing department and distribution. So a lot of my job is just kind of like coordinating marketing efforts and going to our DSP partners, vice versa, our international partners, communicating plans. So yeah, being very organized is very important, and having working documents, because we're all kind of in there, adding our ideas. Plans change, as singles roll out, as kind of great looks come in. We pivot all the time, and then the feedback we get from partners as well as things change as well. So yeah, a lot of collaboration, but just being very organized from the start. Like, I know we always ask for assets, marketing, everything way ahead of time, so we kind of know the general plan, and then so we're not kind of like chasing our tails as we go. But there's so many moving parts. And when I think a marketing plan, I also think that's just a small part, and then press and live and like everything else is a part of that as well. So yeah.
How do you keep track of your projects?
I am a spreadsheet person. I'm used to managing like thousands and thousands of rows and columns. But for me, like with my own projects, for example, it usually is about like thinking, okay, we've written X number of songs. How do we want to record it, and with who? How much is that going to cost? And then working our way backwards. How can we do that? And then that can inform how many shows we play before that, or what grants we have to apply for. So I really just take the problem-solving approach of setting the goals of, I want to make this album in this way, and it'll take this many days, which will cost this much money. And ideally, I want it to have a bit of a campaign after it comes out, which will cost this much money. I want to do, I might have some aspirational festivals to play or tour across Canada for 14 days or something. Those are the goals, and then work my way backwards. How am I going to do that? And I think a lot of people, and also work forward. Like once it's out, what do you do after that to keep people interested? Because I think a lot of bands make the mistake of, the goal is making the album and releasing it, and on the Friday the album comes out, it's like, hey, we did it, our album, everyone check it out. And then 2 weeks go by, there's no mention of anything else. There's no real plans after the album came out. So yeah, I don't know. I just take the problem-solving approach of like, I want to make something I'm proud of, and I want people to hear the thing I'm proud of, and how can I do that? And then always thinking about shows, always thinking about, for me, my level of bands that I play in and that I work with, campus radio, local media is really the target. Like, I'm not probably ever going to be reviewed on Rolling Stone, as much as that would make me giddy. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of that way, and then lots of tracking of who I've emailed and when I should email them again.
Awesome. Yeah, so it sounds like with all of the various project management applications out there in the world that promise to be a panacea, we're using pretty basic tools and to collaborate with teams. So it comes down to that. Great. Okay, let's open up the floor to some questions. We don't have a microphone, so you'll have to pipe up. Let's start with Ryan.
I have a question if you have any insight on playlist placement.
DSP placement?
Yeah. Just in general, it seems like it's kind of like, I don't know, like seems like some people try to offer a service like, we'll get you, it's just a matter of just sending it to people, or is there an inside track to that, or is it kind of like a payola scheme, or like what is it really?
All of the above?
Yeah.
I will definitely say that is like a huge part of my day to day, and it is getting so hard for those placements. And I always say playlists aren't a marketing plan, and I know that like it's such a kind of coveted thing. Like, yeah, we landed like, Rock Now or Mint Canada, like it's great, and it's great to see that support, but I find DSPs are starting to support in other ways. Playlists are changing in general. There's less sort of like flagship focus. It's going to like mood-based. I also think DSPs are less of a tastemaker now. People are finding music elsewhere. So on our end, and if someone ever says like, we'll get you this playlist, like that's not true. I mean, we put in our best efforts. We, have our targets, we put our best foot forward. But again, we're communicating to our partners, and then they're communicating to editorial. So it always comes down to editorial. It's never sort of never payola. It's just like, this is what we got, and then kind of see what comes from it. But I think focusing elsewhere, and that's something that we're always talking about, is how we can kind of shift away from that. Because again, yeah, playlists are great to reach, different audiences, but it shouldn't be, we don't count on it anymore. It's nice to see, but it doesn't always happen.
You have any thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, I think what you're saying of playlists is not a marketing, like getting on a playlist is not a marketing plan, is the number one thing I'd say. Like there's benefits if you get on one. You should definitely try to be, I shouldn't, everyone's different. I shouldn't say you should be on certain platforms. If you don't agree with the models or whatever, don't feel like you have to, but if it makes sense for you, be on them, try, put your best foot forward, like you said. But in my experience, like the levels of bands that I'm in and the levels of bands that I work with, like Spotify is essentially it just doesn't matter. It's if your friends happen to use Spotify, if that's how they listen to music, cool, but it's not a revenue generator. It's not gonna suddenly make you big in Spain, it's just like, that's just the reality for the level of bands that I'm in and play with. And the one of the things I would say is like, for context, like this has changed a little recently, but SiriusXM, the payouts through Sound Exchange, I think it's $40 a play.
Mm-hmm.
So the last band that I had that released a record, we made about $12,000 through Sound Exchange for this record that like we made at home, and it just happened to get 300 plays or whatever. The equivalent of revenue you would have to do on Spotify, I think, is 3 million streams versus 300 plays. So it's like, always keep that in mind too, of like, do you want to spend all of your energy on something that most likely is going to get you cents, and probably your friends is who's listening to it anyway, versus getting them to buy a record on Bandcamp, a t-shirt at your show, nudging their radio stations that actually pay royalties, decent royalties to pay.
Yeah, and then if you're going to go and pitch the DSPs, it's kind of a chicken or the egg scenario, because they're going to want to see you're doing that legwork first.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you can go to them. You can say, "Oh, we got a couple spins on this radio station, and we got a feature in Exclaim, and then you can be in a position to pitch that DSP more effectively." In my experience, a lot of that discussion happens at the distribution level, and unfortunately, independent artists don't even have access to those people who are making the decisions at the editorial level. I think that there were more services, things were more open, more Wild West, but it's been completely clamped down, and I see very little success with people, third parties, pitching DSP playlisting. It'll show up on, Bob's feel-good hits, but that just might be some sort of a content farm in and of itself.
That's actually my station.
I will say though, for pitching, I do always recommend pitching on Spotify for Artists and Amazon for Artists, because that is, your way to communicate what you can. Also, for Spotify especially, you'll be on release radar, and that's huge. So
Yeah.
at least the algorithmic plays in the first week, really important.
And I'll say too, like what I said maybe sounds grim, but I am a believer that like you might as well do the thing. Like if it's not costing you a ton of money, do it. And just don't be disappointed if you never hear back or you never get it. Like that's the reality. It probably won't happen, but it's worth doing because you never know.
Are they actually listening to songs that are being released?
I don't know if anyone knows.
So yeah, we don't really get feedback either on a distributed level, so
It's very
Because how many
mysterious.
songs you release a day, right?
yeah.
So who is listening to it?
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, the reality is that's true of everything you're pitching. Like you probably have experience with this. The last record that I put out, like I think I emailed 400 outlets and had really good, I think, success. But if you look at the percentage of who actually wrote about it, it's like devastatingly low.
Oh yeah, get used to being left on red.
Yeah, most people don't click the link. Most people don't listen to it. But when someone does, and you end up on, like it's like some station in Boston was playing the crap out of us, and it's like, how did this happen? Like I guess they read the email. That's great.
Yeah.
And those things make it really worthwhile. You're like, oh, someone out there cares, and like people in this room really care about music. There's promoters, there's labels, there's musicians. Campus radio people, like there are people out there who care and listen, and when they get the email they take it seriously, and you just never know which one is the one that you're emailing is going to do that. So still do for sure.
Guys, well, first and foremost, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate your time. My name's Pat Clifton, and one thing that I know I always get stuck on is story. I think a lot of the time I've spent thinking about story, I've always approached it from like a bio perspective, but it sounds like it's more maybe messaging for a project than it is like, hey, here's my life story and everything I've done up until this point. So when you talk about story, what does that mean, I guess, for you guys?
Good question. Really good question.
For me, it's like I always think of, if I didn't know me, would I care about what I wrote? So the biggest bio mistake I always see people make is like the first paragraph is like so and so the bass player met so and so the drummer in high school. They started this band. That band broke up. They met this guitar player and then formed this band. Like no one cares about that. You could just sum it up by saying like they're a rock band from Calgary. Like that's essentially saying the same thing. But all of the things that make you like, why do you make music? What is your album about? Like what was the process of making the album? Like a lot of artists might collaborate with someone. That's an interesting story. It might be your first record. It might be your 10th record. Those are interesting stories. It might be just the way you approach a genre. Like you might be approaching it differently, and that becomes your story. But just, yeah, again, I just always think like if this was in my inbox and I replaced the name, does this make me want to listen to the music? And usually the like life details does not make you want to listen to the music unless it's directly related to how the music sounds, right? Like if someone had some traumatic experience in childhood and their music is an expression of that, like that sounds fascinating,
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with like the sort of the first paragraph as well. Like you want to kind of grab someone immediately, and like we have bio and then also story, so we can kind of incorporate two different narratives. Long bio is always great, but if we have something that's in a paragraph that we know like someone might read the first two sentences and really be grabbed and really kind of like feel like they understand, that's always ideal. And then story, just the inspirations, like sort of specific to that release. It can be to the track, the whole project. Sonically, again, like I always like to include like recommend it if you like, because it doesn't have to be like, if you're like, oh, well, I'm like, it's kind of R&B, it's kind of pop, it's kind of this, like rather than just being like, oh, we're, cross genre, like this is who we would kind of align with, maybe specific releases as well, but yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd add is only write things that you want to be reprinted, because a lot of music journalism these days is copy paste the press release. And so if blank outlet, puts that thing out there, you want to make sure that you said the bands you want to be compared to.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to undersell yourself, like have some good adjectives in there, like really exciting project, because that might end up on, again, blank outlet. I don't want to say who copy paste, but just know that like a lot of your press will be what you wrote.
You can't claw it back once it's out there.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. Just to add to that, I think I've been, like when it comes to an artist's story, I've been kind of going from making a 500 character DSP pitch and really drilling into that being like really compelling and juicy, and then reverse engineering that and creating the press release for the single and album announcement. 500 characters isn't a lot, so it's not like Paul was born at an early age. No, that doesn't.
It'd be alarming if you were born in a
You want something that is, people's attention spans are shorter than a goldfish. It's 3 seconds, so you have 3 seconds to hook somebody with your words. a Tumblr. I'm going to send you to a Tumblr. That's how old I am. A Tumblr that I love is called "Why I Deleted Your Band's Promo Email." It's very good because you look at it and it has all of the cliches and hyperbole that music writers are just like, nope, 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 nope. So that's also a good thing to like look at, is this like place where people shit post about people's pitches to see what people don't like. And that can be tricky to you think you know what you want to like put out there, but yeah, I'd say avoid cliches. If it's been said before, don't put it in there. Cliches aren't going to age very well in that information that you have out there about yourself. And yeah, just anecdotes. It doesn't have to be your life story, but to give an example of something that. It could be just a facet of your project. An artist that I was working with in Nova Scotia named Christina Martin created a website, and also she modified her music videos to be accessible to people with screen readers. And so people who are visually impaired can now go to her website, and these music videos are in described audio. So she painstakingly wrote these scripts and then describes what's happening in her music videos. And she went through this whole process with a coach who helped her update her website and do this process. And when I heard this, I was like, this is really interesting. I didn't even know, I was something that I knew nothing about. And so we drilled into that, and that was a really compelling pitch that we went and worked. And Christina got to talk about something that's really important to her, and it marketed the heck out of the project because people are like, this is really interesting. And so it can be about finding that one element of a project that you can pitch, and you're going to hopefully come up with a few different pitches. I'm going to pitch these people the accessibility pitch. I'm going to pitch these people a different pitch. And it's about, tapping into that essence of newsworthiness, which is, what is somebody going to actually write about? Guy makes music. Not a very compelling pitch, Yeah.
Thank you.
I believe you had a question as well.
I did. What would you say is the most important element of marketing for a release?
Being organized, I would say myself. Starting a project without the masters, without the music videos completed, without the marketing drivers in place is always going to be a bad time. Especially if you're engaging the services of a publicist or investing a lot into it. If you're not organized off the top, we're going to spend a lot of time just organizing the project instead of talking to other people about it. So for me, organization and having everything ready at the top of a campaign and not going into it until it's ready, which is difficult for artists. I mean, not everybody can do that, but if you really want to make it go, have all of those assets organized neatly up at the top so that you can be very agile in your approach and give people what they need and what they want when they need it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think having everything, like, and plans can change as well. That's kind of the best part, but at least you have something to kind of go off at the start. And just, I guess, kind of thinking of like a marketing mix that might work best for you. There's still sort of like those traditional methods, like we just ran a billboard for one of our artists in Toronto, and we took photos with them. We did a whole contest. Like, there's street postering. There's so many things that you can do, and obviously you don't need everything in a marketing mix. Like, a lot of it's digital now, but just kind of having those in mind, and then looking at services and what you can do. Like, again, sorry, DSP, but like Spotify, you can run a marquee, or like just being aware of what's out there so you can kind of factor those in, look at your budget, and as things kind of roll and you can see what works and what doesn't, you just have something to go off of.
I think for me, it's the artist is the most important part, and the music, because every decision on like how things are pitched, who's pitched, how many shows to play, what festivals to go, ultimately have to be a fit for the artist. So if the artist knows, if they're confident in who they are and what they want to achieve and what their music is and who they should be playing in front of, it makes everything else so much easier. But if you have an artist that's like I'm kind of poppy, and I don't know, maybe next album I want to go in this direction, and someone asks like, who do you sound like, and they list 4 different artists that are super disparate, like it makes it really hard to like, how do you put a story together, which festivals might be a good fit for this, etc. So I think just like really starting with an artist like statement, like this is who I am, at least for per album, like this is who I am for this album and this is what I want to do.
We have time for maybe one more question. Yeah, Shannon.
I'm a local music photographer, and I facilitate to very DIY kind of level right now, budget wise. Where can I be directing my clients to get the best bang for the buck? I mean, we do, live music photography, of course, but what other aspects would you like to see coming from artists, from a photographer's point of view, where I can kind of lead in the right direction?
I mean, good press photos are extremely important, one of the most important assets that you have to roll with. If you have a compelling press photo, it's going to open doors, people are going to click on your links. So you play an important role, Shannon. I would people get a damn horizontal shot and a vertical shot. If anybody's been to one of my talks previously, I'm like, landscape. But in print, that's what people want. They want photos like this, but of course we're all trained now to want photos like this. So yeah, having both would be great. But shout out to all the amazing photographers. Very important role you play. People sometimes think of the photos as an afterthought, so I think that's like one of the first things you want to lock in is photos that you're stoked on and make you look and feel good, and it's going to give you a lot of energy to like share your stuff.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think having like multiple photos is always good. There's different purposes for different images. Having sort of like consistent branding across all of your accounts, your DSPs, your socials. It's always strange when you go to an artist profile and the pictures from like 5 years ago coming out to a new release. It's like how you're wanting to present yourself in the moment. And again, yeah, visually how they, you don't want something like cropped weird or whatever. So like keeping a lot of things in your back pocket, and yeah, just making sure everything kind of looks consistent and professional.
And the only thing I'd add is, again, artist-centered, where the photo has to represent the actual artist and what they want to be getting out there. And, some of the most iconic photos are like anti-promo shots, but that fits the audience. Like bands like The Replacements kind of made their impact by like never showing their faces in videos, music videos. The Clash, probably the most iconic photo, is just the bass player, not even the singer, smashing his bass. And then you have like, you know, artists doing glitzy shots that are like maybe super empowering or super glamorous, and that gives a certain vibe. They all have their place, but if you were to try and get the Clash to do that, or you were trying to get, you know, if Taylor Swift tried to do a photo where she was like, I'm not interested in the camera, like it wouldn't work, right? Artist focused, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, back to that authenticity piece. And also, once that photo's out there on the internet, it's out there forever. So make sure that you love it, because who knows, it'll show up when you do a panel discussion somewhere down the line.
We might end up on that Tumblr.
Yeah, I think there's another talk starting at 11:30, so maybe it would be good to stop here and give folks a chance to say hi if they want.
Sure.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Sean, for sharing your expertise with us today. Your insights will undoubtedly inspire and guide our audience in their musical journeys. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.